On this episode, we're going to dissect the FBI's intelligence assessment titled Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement. We're going to break it down into who they are, what the threat is and is not, how the assessment was made, and where are the interdiction points. Grab your seats. It's time for Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. Welcome to Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. I'm your host, Holt Clark. On August 3rd of 2017, the FBI released an intelligence assessment. In the opening paragraph, the FBI is assessing that it's very likely Black Identity Extremist BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory, lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for future violence. The FBI uses the term very likely 3 times in the opening paragraph alone. The FBI intelligence assessment has a specific meaning for the terms such as likely and very likely. The assessment includes this chart in one of the appendices of the document. The executive summary goes on to say further that the FBI has high confidence in this assessment based on a history of violent incidents attributed to the individuals who acted on behalf of their ideological beliefs. The FBI makes this judgment with the key assumption that recent incidences are ideologically motivated. Just as we saw in the chart of likelihood, the FBI has specific definitions for its terms and confidence level. In the same appendix, you'll find these definitions. At Counterterrorism Roll Call, we deal with low probability, high consequence events, and this FBI assessment certainly falls into that category. This assessment is addressing a small group of people with overlapping ideologies. The Black Identity Extremist ideology mixed with an anti-authoritarian sovereign citizen ideology. The FBI has labeled this the Black Ideology Extremist Movement. The sovereign citizen extremist movement is certainly an interesting one. I rarely ever quote the Southern Poverty Law Center, but I will here. The strange subculture of the sovereign citizen movement, whose adherents hold truly bizarre, complex anti-government beliefs. Sovereign citizens believe that they get to decide which laws to obey and which ones to ignore. They don't think they should pay taxes either. Now, the second group that we're talking about is Black Identity Extremists. This is a grouping together of black separatists like the Nation of Islam and black nationalists, groups like the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army, and of leaders like the late Malcolm X. Based on several cases we're going to discuss in a moment, the FBI assessed that it is very likely that individuals with a black identity ideology who adopted a sovereign citizen identity reinforced a sense of disenfranchisement from society and perception that criminal justice system is unjust. But the best known is the Moorish Science Temple of America, an American national and religious organization founded by Noble Drew Ali. It's based in the belief that African Americans are descendants of Moorish Empire and thus Moorish by nationality and Islamic faith. Key to understanding this assessment is that the FBI is talking about violence targeting police officers, not violence that may occur to you during the normal conduct of your duties. Now, the assessment also points out that BIE-targeted violence has been very rare over the last 20 years. Furthermore, historically, there's been sparse evidence of any Black identity extremists taking on any sovereign citizen ideology or Moorish beliefs. Historically, the Moors have engaged in nonviolent fraudulent schemes, things to do with taxes and property and documentation. However, those can lead to involvement with the police.
What was her downfall, brother?
Well, she signed a treaty of peace with the Republic of Texas.
The European white supremacist sovereign citizen group called the Republic of Texas. Soon after that, what happened?
Well, they took some hostages. They ended up having a shootout with the federal government.
This FBI assessment is based on 6 cases occurring since 2014. All cases have 2 things in common. Number 1, the BIE suspects acted in lethal retaliation for perceived brutality against African Americans. And number 2, police officers were targeted as opposed to the normal duty contact. The 6 case studies are Micah Johnson, who on July 7th of 2016 shot 11 law enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas. During a standoff with the police, he expressed that he was influenced by BIE ideology. In October of 2014, Zale Thompson advocated for an armed struggle against the oppressors. He took a hatchet and attacked 4 NYPD officers in Queens. On October 4th and 13th of 2016, an unknown subject shot at 2 different police stations in Indiana. The subject left behind a handwritten note identifying himself as a Moor and making anti-white statements. Gavin Eugene Long, on July 17th of 2016, shot 6 law enforcement officers in Baton Rouge, killing 3, including 1 African-American officer. They later found in his possession the home address of 2 of the officers. He had declared himself a Moor, and he had changed his slave name to a Moorish name. On September 13th of 2016, Mark Laquan Payne drove his vehicle toward 3 officers in Phoenix, Arizona, hitting 2. After he was arrested, it was discovered his social media tied him to Black Identity Group and a Moorish group. On November 21st, 2014, a Black Identity extremist was arrested and convicted of purchasing explosives to use in Ferguson, Missouri. He threatened to kill white Ferguson prosecutor and chief of police. He had ties to a sovereign citizen movement, and he had filed paperwork declaring himself an Aboriginal/Indigenous free sovereign Moor. Were these 6 cases targeting police officers terrorism? Well, number 1, they were all politically motivated, and number 2, they targeted citizens. In the United States, we make a clear distinction legally and morally between our police officers and our military. So by definition, these were terrorist acts. While this assessment is labeled FOUO and law enforcement sensitive, it was leaked and it's available all over the internet. And as with everything these days, it's controversial.
Black Identity Extremists, that's the label an internal report by the FBI's Counter-Terrorism Division is giving to black activists around the country. The report says they pose a growing threat of premeditated violence against law enforcement in response to police brutality. Former government officials and legal experts say no such movement exists, and this is an attempt by the FBI and the Donald Trump administration to find an equivalent threat to white supremacists and silence black activists.
Now, this phenomenon is not new, and it is not on one side of the political aisle. In 2009, Homeland Security released an intelligence assessment. GOP politicians said unfairly characterized military veterans as right-wing extremists. Remember, at its heart, this assessment is an officer safety issue. The FBI assesses that over the next year it is very likely that the BIE's perception of unjust treatment of African Americans and the perceived unchallenged illegitimate actions of law enforcement will inspire premeditated attacks. It further goes on to say this may lead to an increase in BIE group membership, collaboration with other BIE groups, and the appearance of additional violent lone offenders motivated by the BIE rhetoric. The FBI further assesses it is very likely additional controversial police shootings of African Americans and the associated legal proceedings will continue to serve as drivers for violence against law enforcement officers. As a police officer, what should you be looking for? Well, the assessment said the possible indicators and warnings of violent threat to law enforcement include advocating for violence against law enforcement, violent anti-white rhetoric, attempts to acquire illegal weapons and explosives, and affiliations with other BIEs and sovereign citizen extremist movements. Finally, I want to encourage you to read this assessment yourself. It's only 12 pages, but it might take a couple of readings to truly understand what it's saying. I want you to see what it really says and what it doesn't say. Don't accept the political analysis on one side or the other, and that includes this YouTube channel. Until next week on Counterterrorism Roll Call, be alert and be safe. Thanks for watching. Please visit our sponsor, patriotthreads.org, and stay tuned for a special offer from them. Would you do me a favor and hit the like button? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. If you want to know more about me, go to my website, follow me on Twitter, or just run me on NCIC. I'll see you next week on Counterterrorism Roll Call. Until then, be alert, be safe. PatriotThreads.org is apparel with a purpose. Patriot Threads offers state-themed, game day to outdoor lifestyle apparel, like the new line of Southern Trout shirts and introducing the new Back the Blue shirts. All are 100% printed in the USA. Are you looking for a new, exciting, profitable fundraiser? PatriotThreads.org would love to help. Go to their website for details. Use promo code ROLLCALL at checkout and you could save 20% on the sale. And Patriot Threads will donate 20% of the profits to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. PatriotThreads.org is a proud sponsor of the men and women of law enforcement.